I read recently that the New York Times bought the popular daily puzzle game Wordle for over $1 million. Over $1 million. And well, this got me to thinking, you know, I'm getting older. Sometimes I look around and I don't even recognize the world I'm living in anymore. It's jarring. Things are changing every day. And not always for the better. And therefore, I think it's time to take a moment to talk about how things were just a bit more simple back in my day. Back in my day, people weren't obsessing over some puzzle game called Wordle. No, sir. Back then, our frustrating word puzzles were text conversations with our moms. You'd have to go back and forth 5 times before you could even figure out what the hell she was trying to say. And in the end, it turned out to be that someone you went to high school with drove their car into a grocery store while high on fentanyl. Thanks for the intel, Mom. Real useful stuff. Back in my day, Spider-Man No Way Home wasn't setting box office records. No, back then, Titanic was the movie setting all the records. Incidentally, that movie could have also been subtitled No Way Home. You think Green Goblin's bad? Meet Iceberg. Now, of course, if Spider-Man was the captain, they would have never hit the iceberg, you know, because of Spidey sense. No, you're the nerd. The nerd alert is on you. Back in my day, the Queen didn't have COVID. No, back then, if the Queen woke up with chills in the middle of the night, it was just because she got a Google alert for Prince Andrew on her phone. Maybe he got a new horse, oh. Back in my day, Domino's wasn't offering customers $3 to choose carry-out because of a shortage of delivery drivers. No sironi pepperoni. Back then, Domino's delivery drivers were offering customers $3 for a rip on that gravity bong sitting over there on the kitchen table. Back in my day, the CDC didn't say you could leave quarantine after 5 days. You had to quarantine for 10 days. And even after that, you'd tell your wife, honey, I'm still feeling a little symptomatic. Think you can handle the kids for another few days? And then you'd sit in your room, and for the 3rd time that week, you'd watch Liam Neeson in Taken. Because you cared about keeping your family safe, just like Liam Neeson did in Taken. In fact, you're exactly like Liam Neeson in Taken. Back in my day, artists weren't removing their music. Back in my day, artists weren't removing their music from Spotify because of Joe Rogan. No, back then, the only thing Joe Rogan was causing people to do was eat horse rectums on TV for a chance to win $50,000. You know, come to think of it, he's always been weirdly persuasive. Back in my day, the Pope wasn't calling pet owners who opt not to have children selfish. No, back in my day, when the Pope was mad at pet owners, he'd simply transfer them to another parish, but then, you know, they'd get a new pet. Because, Rusty, that's what pet lovers do. That's what you call a pattern. What did you call them? Petophiles. Oh, that's very clever, Rusty. You were a dog, so you didn't hear them groaning. I knew you should bail on that punchline. You dumb dog. Back in my day, COVID wasn't making people scared to attend the Winter Olympics. Back then, the Winter Olympics were the safest place you could be, unless you were an ice skater in 1994, in which case you better watch your back. Back in my day, Russia wasn't threatening to invade Ukraine. Borscht burps. Back in my day, they just did it. They just flat out stole an entire peninsula in broad daylight. But not like a long time ago either. We had this show. And back then, we would say to Russia, hey, you can't do that. And they would say, what are you going to do, stop us? And we wouldn't. And that's why all of this is happening. Back in my day, the Girl Scouts weren't selling their cookies on DoorDash. Tag a what? I love it when a joke goes exactly the way I told the writers it would. All week. They said, no, you wait. They say, you wait, you'll say tag a what? And it'll be applause. You'll have to pause. No, back then, the Girl Scouts, back in my day, the Girl Scouts had to sell their cookies the old-fashioned way by grabbing their clipboards, lacing up their boots, and walking all the way to the living room where they would ask their parents to bring the order sheet into work and guilt their coworkers into buying a box. Well, I'm sorry I had to do that, but sometimes this grumpy Gramps has got to get his grape on. This has been back in my day. We'll be right back.